Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. These irises were fantastic in February. This is Iris George, really good, rich purple colour. But now they're long gone, and the foliage is slowly dying back and feeding into the bulb to provide next year's flowers. But that ties up a really nice little terracotta pan. So what I'm doing is taking them out, and I will plant that into a border as a group. And that means I now have a pot which I can use for seed. So I'm recycling the plants and recycling the pot. On today's programme, Mark Lane has 2 spring container recipes to add a touch of class to both a sunny and a shady spot.
Now, when you think about planting up any container, think about different layers.
And Adam embarks on a brand new project to help a family in Leicester transform their new build garden.
Between us, we've got so many ideas, but just don't know where to start.
And I shall be planting more bulbs, but this time summer flowering ones, in my writing garden, and also sowing vegetable seeds in a variety of containers that are alternatives to plastic. Carol went to visit Bodnant some weeks ago, where the winter colours were really spectacular, and none brighter or stronger than from the dogwood. Now, dogwood has this fabulous bark. It's sort of iridescent and illuminated from within, but you only get that in new wood. So it needs pruning regularly to stimulate new growth. And the time to do it is right now. When you start to see the new leaves appearing, that's the time to cut. And then there'll be rapid regrowth, and then December, January, February, March, even April of next year, you'll have that iridescent glow. And you can do this a number of ways. You can either prune a whole plant right back every 2 or 3 years, but then you don't have anything to see during the summer, or you can prune part of a plant right back. As long as you cut back to living growth, it will regrow strongly. Now, this large yellow dogwood is Cornus flaviromere, and it's a really good shape, but it's getting a bit of a tangle. So I'm going to cut some of it out to thin it. And it's worth pointing out that when you do prune as hard as this, there is a sacrifice, and it's the flowers. You can see here the flower buds are forming. Personally, I think the bark is much more dramatic and is the reason that you grow the plants rather than the flowers themselves. And a little bit there. It's astonishing how easily dogwood and willow take from cuttings at this time of year. If you just use the material you've pruned, you can create dozens of new plants. But you can make it easier by taking off side shoots. In this case, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to prune that off, prune that, and take that off there. Now, that's the basis for a nice strong shrub, and I want to bury that at least 4 inches, and it wouldn't matter if I buried it right up to there. So push it into soft ground. There it goes, down in. That's nice and strong, and that's it. That's all you have to do. Now, while I'm here, it's worth having a look at these tree ferns, Dicksonia antarctica. I planted these last summer. I thought they looked fantastic, wrapped them up last autumn against possible cold. What I hadn't reckoned on was cold of -14 degrees. So there is a real risk that that night of very hard frost in December killed them. We can unwrap the extra layer of hessian I put around it, and then the fleece. The whole point has been to protect the junction between the leaves and the top of the trunk. Doesn't matter at all that these have died back. That's perfectly okay. So I'm going to cut those back. And what I want to see is signs of new growth. And until new growth comes, I won't know if it survived the winter. But I'm not going to hurry into anything because it could easily take another month before anything grows, and I won't give up on it until June. It doesn't look great, I have to say, and that's sad because these are expensive, lovely plants. Let's try the other one. Look at that, fantastic. That's so good to see a green frond. If there is one green frond, it's alive. Obviously, I will need to protect that if we get another hard frost. Inevitably, we put so much of ourselves into a garden. We have a precious plant and we want it to come through winter. Because over the years, you do put your life into your garden. I've been here 25 years now. However, many of us find ourselves, and I certainly have in the past, of confronting a garden that is just part of a building site. There's no sign of a garden in any shape or form there. And for many people, that is very daunting indeed, and they just don't know where to begin. Which is why Adam is setting out to help people who are starting from scratch. And as a multi-Chelsea gold medal winner, few people are better qualified.
Last year, over 150,000 new builds popped up around England. For me, that is exciting because it means there are opportunities to create new gardens. I think for a lot of people, they're comfortable with setting out their houses, you know, and the decoration, but they open those patio doors and they become quite fearful of that space outside. But I'm going to sort of demonstrate to you how to create a garden from scratch. Hello,
Hello, Adam.
Lovely to meet you, mate. Lovely to meet you.
Hi, Adam.
Hello, you
Nice
all right?
to see you. Yes, thank you.
Your sister.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, say hello.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Say hello.
Cool.
Come on,
Come on in.
have a look at our
Show me that
garden.
garden, yeah?
Yes.
Amit and Vibhuti live with baby Yash in a new build that they've had for 2 years. So far, they have created a terrace and put in a small sleeper wall, but haven't really thought beyond that. So this is it.
Yep.
This is it. What do you think?
That's quite overpowering, isn't it? And
Definitely.
that wall at the back there, how does it make you feel when you come out here?
I don't come out here just purely because I don't actually enjoy the space. I think the first thing I see is that, and that's all I see, and it takes away from the work that Amit's done already. It needs a massive transformation and just don't know where to start.
Why do you not think you know where to start?
Because between us, we've got so many ideas,
Yeah.
but they don't all fit together.
I'm sure that we can create something that, you know, works.
That would be amazing. We'd
Yeah.
love an extension of our home to be like outside, whereas in right now, the home stops at these doors.
Yeah. When you're creating a garden from scratch, the first thing you can do is draw up a practical list of what you really want from your garden.
I think entertaining is definitely key. Being Asian, we have large families and there's always get-togethers.
On average, how many people entertain?
If we get all the family around, we're looking about 20 to 30 at least.
Yeah, so realistically, part of that entertaining is going to be inside and outside,
And
isn't
outside,
it?
yes,
Otherwise, if we
definitely.
lay you a terrace for 30 people, that's
the whole
garden.
garden.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is having Yash, it's important that he's got somewhere to play as well. But I think most importantly for me is that it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
A little bit more welcoming, really.
What about anything like sheds, you know, washing lines?
I wouldn't mind a little man cave, but I don't think that's going to be possible. But
No, it's not. I can
No.
tell by the look. It's not.
No.
It's not going to be possible. So for your practical list, think about things like how much time have you got to look after the garden? What do you really need from the space? How many people do you want to sit on a terrace? Next, create what I call an individual list, which reflects your personal taste. What do you both love? Shapes you like, colours you like?
I think I've got this feel of a tropical kind of sense. Palms,
Right.
bright colours as well.
Yeah,
especially.
strong colours.
Yeah, strong
Yeah,
colours.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, that gives it more of a visual.
He's already
Yeah,
smiling,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
brilliant.
exactly.
I love it. But it's like being at home, seriously.
We were like chalk and cheese.
The whole country will be looking and going, Yeah, this is
We
it.
understand.
This is what goes on. So now you tell me.
I like neutrals.
You like neutrals. Take inspiration from books, magazines, and the internet. Work out what colours, shapes, and styles you like. Really think about the atmosphere that you want to create in your space. Before we start, any idea on budget?
Yeah.
You've said about £1,000.
Yeah.
If we're going to spend that kind of money in the garden, it would be lovely to be able to utilise the garden for its seating or anything all year round. So I don't know, there's a bit of a challenge for you.
Yeah, I don't control the weather. I can do a lot of things, but not control the weather. The first step before you lift any turf is to measure up. We start measuring at the corner there.
Okay.
So we call this a running line, which is gives us fixed measurements. So you're on 0, and then the edge of the house, 2 metres.
This is why I shouldn't be doing this.
What, because you can't hold the tape measure?
Yeah.
Exactly.
This might seem an awful lot of work, all these sort of measurements, but for me that's one of the most important things you do when you're creating a garden, is start to measure the space. It's really being able to take the measurements to produce yourself a scale plan so you can really start to understand that space. Right, fella, what's that one?
That's 9.3, Adam.
Brilliant. 1.4. As well as these measurements, it's really important to understand where the sun comes up and where it goes down. And it's not just because of the plants, it's where do you want to sit in the garden? Is it in shade? Is it in sun?
4.5, Adam.
It's crucial to find out what kind of soil you have so you know what plants you can grow. So get yourself a soil testing kit. We've learnt that Amit and Vibhuti have alkaline soil. All that's left to do now is get your design on paper. First I'm tackling that towering back wall. If we did just pick one climber that you like and we worked it and just gave you a green backdrop to the garden, and then we paint the fence, that's, I suppose, the first problem. The next one for me is, talked about entertaining an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
Where we are at the moment, this is north facing, so as we know, because we're sat here at the minute, it's cold. And I think even at times in the summer, it's still going to be cold.
Yeah.
So I'd quite like to get you out further into that space. If we start to sit people back in this corner, the focal point then we get is all the way across there. So if we just actually have a look now, this is all very, very posing. But if we look down towards the houses, it
Yes.
feels a lot softer, yeah? But also you're going to get evening sun down there. So this is maybe another area to sit. To deal with the fact of here behind us, this is very high and that van looks like it's coming into your garden. Maybe put tree up there. And then I think we need to be really brave. That building looks really overpowering, and I think if we put a tree there, that will start to soften that and bring that down into this garden. If you're planting trees to hide an eyesore, think about the shape you need to deal with the problem. So, a few weeks' time, we'll be starting to dig things up. All right?
We.
Oh, we. Oh, it started already. We.
Digging.
Yes, we will be digging. We will be digging. What a cracking couple they are. They're really excited about the next part of this journey. And next time, here, we're really going to get stuck in.
Sometimes I have to remind myself that this garden was a bare field attached to a rough building site when we moved here. And I think the best advice that Adam gave is take your time. There's no hurry. But we will be following the progress of that garden as he makes repeated visits over the next few months. I get lots of letters about pruning hydrangeas, and I think it worries people, but actually they're very simple indeed. Most hydrangeas, like this one, this is Hydrangea macrophylla veitchii, can be left over winter, and the old flowers die back, and as you see the new buds start to grow, you can trim it back. But all you need to do is cut off the old flower heads and then just tidy it up. So if I go around this, here we've got a flower head here, just cut back to a bud beneath it. This one here, cut back there. Now this in the middle, I'm going to take right out because it's a bit weedy. There is a hydrangea, Hydrangea paniculata, that flowers on new growth. And that means that you can cut it back really quite hard in early spring. But the majority of hydrangeas flower on older growth, so you don't want to cut it back too hard. That'll do. So I've tidied it up. Any crossing, old, damaged branches have been removed. I've taken off all the old flower heads, and that won't need pruning again at all until next March or April. Now, what we want from hydrangeas, of course, is late summer flower that actually can last right through into autumn. But at this time of year, particularly after the spring that we had, summer can seem like a distant dream. But Mark Lane, in his own garden, shows that you can create really dramatic containers that give us a foretaste of strong summer colour.
This is my garden, and I absolutely love it. And I love my borders. They're contemporary, they're wild and naturalistic. And while the gardens are still asleep, it's so important to have containers in your garden. They add movable colour and they add interest throughout the whole year.
I'm going to plant another couple, one for a sunny location, one for a more shady spot. Using containers made from recycled apple boxes. They're widely available where I live in Kent.
Obviously choose whatever container takes your fancy, but if you're using shrubs, go for something really deep so that the roots can go down and spread. Many containers fail because there's not enough root space, so they get constrained and they just don't survive.
After lining the box to protect the wood, don't forget some holes for drainage. I've added polystyrene for crocks and filled it with a multi-purpose compost.
I'm starting with my shady container. Now, when you think about planting up any container, think about different layers. And then think how you're going to see it. So think about different angles and then give it a theme. I want this one to evoke wonderful memories of walking through the Sandringham estate. So this one is going to have a woodland theme. I'm going to start with this beautiful ornamental cherry, Prunus incisor Coho no Mai. I love this. It's absolutely abundant and floriferous. It's just a froth of white flowers. Now, this would normally go in a sunny position, but it does also do pretty well in a partially shaded site. So I'm using it for this woodland theme, and it will add really good height for the back of the container.
It will slowly grow to about 1.5 meters tall, giving a delicious dappled effect on the plants below.
Next up is this lovely Mahonia aquifolium. It has the most beautiful sulphur yellow flowers that just smell of lily of the valley, and it has these beautiful purple and green leaves. They look a bit like a holly leaf, and they're just absolutely stunning. And they'll catch any of the tiny bits of light that come through in a shaded area, and it will look perfect right in front of this ornamental cherry. I think you'll all agree that any shady container needs a fern, and who wouldn't love this stunning Dryopteris atrata? And just look at it. The fronds are just so tactile, and they'll add wonderful texture.
I'm planting it here because they create a backbone to the container. Its vibrant green will make the other colours sing. I'm also adding the tightly curled fronds of the copper shield fern, and just imagine the leaves of this narrow hart's tongue fern glistening in the morning dew. Together, they add vital structure and balance to the container. time for some more colour. Think of woodland edges, and I automatically think of Brunnera macrophylla Jack Frost. And to mimic nature, I'm planting it at the rim of the container.
Another two plants are Vinca and Pulmonaria. They will just fit in with this scheme beautifully. The Pulmonaria, it has mottled silvery leaves which will pick up the Brunnera leaf, and then it has these delicate pink blue flowers, and of course what do pink and blue make? They make purple, so they will then pick out the wonderful Mahonia leaf. And then the Vinca, that will just tumble down the front of the container, and if you're lucky it will flower throughout the whole of the year.
To complete the look, I've added some of my favourite spring plants: grape hyacinth, erythronium, cowslip and native primrose. They'll make me happy every time I see them.
I love this shady container because of the textures and the movement and the colours. This is spring in a shaded container. This is a container for a sunny spot. It evokes memories of this wonderful holiday that I had in Ischia in Italy. And it's just beautiful. Clear blue waters and purples and pinks by the waterside.
At the back, I've added the Ribes sanguineum with its pink blossoms dripping from the branches.
This is a shrub that should be better known. It's Laura patellum chonensevar rubrum, or the more descriptive fire dance. It has the most beautiful bright pink flowers, which are the colour of my scarf, and they're like ribbons, and they contrast wonderfully against the purple shiny leaves.
Cordyline, with its long, strappy purple leaves, reflect the heuchera and Laura petalum, and add an architectural element, as do the yellow tree heath. Amongst that, I've dotted the luscious, deep colours of anemone and primula.
And another great plant is ranunculus, and I really love this shocking pink one right at the front. They remind me of sort of rosebuds or peonies. They're just beautiful and can be easily found at garden centres at this time of year.
To balance out the almost acid colours are the pure white hyacinth carnegie and the snowy white anemone. They're like little light bulbs illuminating the whole scheme.
And there we have it, a spring container to remind yourself of holidays and warmer months to come.
Well, certainly the prospect of bright summer days filled with colour is tantalising. But a bit of spring colour wouldn't go amiss, but it will happen. I have this feeling it's about to unfold. Come on, Nige. Come on. Now this year, I'm trying to use as little plastic as I can in the garden at Longmeadow. And in seed sowing terms, there are alternatives, and I've been trying some, and I've got some more here. You can reuse loo roll holders. These normally go on the compost heap here, and they do rot down very well, but there's no reason why you can't sow into them, and they make a good deep plug or container. And that's ideal for plants like legumes, which need a nice, straight, deep root run. So I'm going to use some of those. And if we fill that up, they will wedge each other into place. And then I will fill those with compost. And it is coir-based, there's no peat involved. Okay. Now, I'm going to sow a legume into there. But this is one I've never grown before. It's called edamame. It's a Japanese bean. You may have had it in a Japanese restaurant, or if you've been to Japan. You don't eat the pod, you just eat the bean. And these are soybeans, and they're delicious and highly nutritious. And they do apparently grow well in this country. 2 seeds in each, and then if one doesn't germinate, the other will come good. Right, I'll just cover those over with a trickle of compost. And I will plant them inside the loo roll because that will quickly biodegrade. So you don't have to lift them out, the whole thing goes into the ground as a unit. Right, put a label on there. So that can go in the greenhouse to germinate and then be ready to plant out in the middle of May. I want to make some pots now. And these have been around for quite a few years and I think it's fair to say not taken terribly seriously because everyone's just used plastic. Well, now their time has come, I think, and it's a great way of recycling newspaper. That's about the right length. So if you cut your paper, so it overlaps about double its length. Just roll it along like that. Fold the end over, and then the base has a divot sticking up, and by screwing it into that, that just tightens it all together, slide it off, and there is a little container. And in essence, all that we're doing is making a container to hold a seed and some soil long enough for it to establish a root system. It used to be a bit of a worry about heavy metals in the ink, particularly coloured inks. But actually, that is no longer a problem. It's not used in the printing process, so don't worry about it. There we go. This is a really good form of recycling, and apart from buying the kit, which doesn't cost very much, it's going to cost you absolutely nothing. And then just fill them with compost. And I thought we'd sow some courgettes. Now this is a variety called Gold Rush. It's got lovely yellow skin. And in my experience, once they start producing fruit, they produce very quickly and they get large very quickly, and they're much nicer eaten small. But that goes in there like that, one to each. The one thing that these will need, particularly the courgettes and all cucurbits, is heat with which to germinate. Above a radiator on a windowsill is absolutely fine, or in a porch. If you can get a propagator, and you can get heated propagators, that's perfect. And I use a heated mat, and that has transformed our seed sowing here at Longmeadow. But any of those will do the job. Now, a few weeks ago, we started our Every Space Counts competition. And we asked you to send in pictures of your garden as long as it was no bigger than 6 metres by 6 metres. And hundreds of you did so thank you very much indeed. Although, I have to say, one or two were just a little bit eccentric. However, our team of judges, consisting of the garden designer James Alexander Sinclair, who of course is also an esteemed long-standing Chelsea judge, a producer from this programme, Louise Hamden, and Adam Frost, went through them all and came up with a short list of 5 finalists. Tonight, we're going to show you the first of those 5.
My name's Mike. I'm from Hackney in East London. I've lived here for 12 years and I started working on this garden about 8 years ago. When I first moved in, I decided to treat this garden just like any other room in the house. But instead of furnishing it with chairs and tables, I used plants instead. Originally, I had some decking, there was some grass and some small borders around the edges. So I turned the grass over, put down some weed suppressant, and slowly built up what you see now. I suppose my inspiration for the garden comes from the countries I've visited on holiday, where you find yourself surrounded by palms, bananas and other exotic plants, and I wanted to recreate that back at home in London. Fortunately, I'm surrounded by these high walls which creates its own microclimate and gives me ideal growing conditions for most of the plants that I've got here. I did some research into these plants and found that many of them were winter hardy, low maintenance, but most importantly evergreen too. I tried to make sure that the plants that were in pots were drought tolerant, so I went for cycads and agapanthus for all year round interest, and for a splash of colour in summer I've got cannas and gingers popping up. The goal of my design in this garden was to stimulate the senses and also to inspire people. I wanted people to have to brush past leaves and duck under bushes and plants to have to see everything. I wanted an area that had scent and an area that had sounds as well. I think the key to an interesting small garden is making the best use of the space available to you. And I found that going upwards with my planting allowed you to do this. And at the same time, it also gives you space underneath for underplanting, which allows you to add smaller plants and give you more colour throughout the season. I use big structural plants like the bamboos, the fatsia and the bananas to make the whole space look a lot bigger. I enjoy the whole garden really, but scattered around it there are little mementos of the places I've been to. There's a couple of lizards from Bali, there's a tortoise there from California, some bits from Mexico. My garden's special to me because it's a reminder of the places I've visited. It's a nice place to have breakfast in the morning, and after a long day in a city and stressed out, it's nice to return here and feel like you're on holiday again. It's just a really nice place to relax.
We'll be showing the other 4 gardens over the next 4 weeks, and then you'll get a chance to vote on which one you think should be the winner. And the result of that vote will be announced at Gardeners World Live in June. There's no question that this has been one of the latest springs I can remember for a long time, and the garden is yet to burst into spring glory, but there are 1 or 2 treasures to be found. And one of my favourites is here, down the end of the spring garden. This is the Snake's Head Fritillary. And it likes it down here because this is one of the dampest bits of the whole garden. When it floods, it comes right in. And these are spring bulbs that positively need damp conditions. So if you've got a part of the garden which you want some spring colour, but it's no good for tulips or daffodils or crocus because the ground's too wet, put in some Snake's Head Fritillaries. And they will come up, they will love it, and every year they will astonish you with their exotic beauty. The thing is, we're all so desperate for colour under these grey skies, and it's really quite raw and chilly today. You kind of feel like the gardener's gone into a kind of hold. But the truth is, plants are growing well. Look here in the jewel garden. The alliums and the tulips have put on a mass of foliage. And they're just regulating themselves so that the flower buds are there, and as soon as the sun comes out, then they'll open them. And it's important not to think that somehow the garden doesn't need any attention. Because there is foliage growth and because things are happening, you need to keep on top of it too. So, for example, these clematis. This is group-free clematis. It's a Viticella. It was cut back about 3 weeks ago, and you can see there's plenty of new good growth on that. So keep on top of tying in all clematis, roses, anything that's quietly growing under these grey skies. Now, we've still got lots to come on tonight's programme. Flo Headlam scales new heights as she goes down to Weston Burt to help out with tree work at the Arboretum. But first, we pay a visit to Hever Castle, where despite a grey, rainy day, the daffodils were looking superb. But they've been working there to extend the daffodil season, and Nick Bailey has been to meet the man behind that project.
Narcissus have to be one of our nation's best loved and most adored plants. And of course, they're better known as daffodils. And as they emerge in our parks and gardens and sway in the breeze and reveal these beautiful trumpets, it's a sure sign that spring, in theory, is in full swing. I'm here at Hever Castle in Kent to meet a legend who's dedicated his life to this genus. Johnny Walkers is a champion grower who's been exhibiting award-winning displays over the last 30 years, winning a staggering 35 RHS gold medals in the process. It's no wonder he's earned himself the nickname, the man with the Midas touch. In recent years, Johnny has been responsible for selecting a wide range of high-performing daffodil varieties to thrive here. Hello, Johnny. Nice to finally meet you. You're clearly a man who's passionate about narcissus. What first drew you to them?
My father was a bulb grower, so that's all I've ever known all my life. And then I decided to specialise in daffodils because there's such a wide range of different types. And so, you know, it's just a superb flower to have.
I guess most people think of them as these fairly sort of straightforward yellow flowers, but they're really, really diverse.
Yeah, 13 different divisions, and the divisions denote the characteristics of the flower, of the variety. The cyclaminous types, for instance, division 6, have the swept-back petals, make them look as though they've been in a wind tunnel.
Right.
The large flowering ones, the ordinary yellows, for instance, they'd be trumpet type. But if you get a division 4, double daffodil, of course, that cup is all mixed in with the petals as well.
So something like Rip Van Winkle, where you've got masses
That's right, yeah, all sorts of, spiky bits almost, you know.
Now, I understand you've been looking to diversify and increase the range of different narcissus that they've got growing. How many have you managed to inject in?
We've actually brought in 23 new varieties this year. We've brought in things like sealing wax here, which is a very early flowering variety. That's the starting point of broadening the season here so that there's always something to see for at least 8 weeks, probably even 10. And it is a wonderful flower, isn't it?
It looks like the weather's finally picking up.
Well, I think you could be right, actually, Nick. Here's one that's a little bit more unusual, a variety called Ice Follies.
I think it's a really beautiful form, and what always interests me with narcissus is people so often just look at the front of the flower, but actually I think there's lovely things going on at the back as well. There's that green suffusing into yellow on this particular cultivar, and then into cream. It really makes it quite a special plant, doesn't it? I note that this is growing in really quite damp, almost wet conditions, but that's not the sort of typical advice for narcissus, is it?
No, our normal advice for planting daffodils would be in a moisture-retentive, well-drained soil, you know, no extremes. But here, you see, they're growing on the side of the bank here. Some of those roots must almost be in water permanently, so they're very good at adapting to the conditions that they're in. This poor fella's not been planted, but you know, there's foliage already beginning to grow there because all the energy is already in the bulb, ready for it, and there's the flower bud already there.
And so this is why it's so important to make sure that you don't cut your leaves off too early, because they need to feed back into that bulb and charge it up with energy for the next season.
Absolutely. You must leave it a minimum of 8 weeks after flowering before you do anything with it. And definitely don't tie it in knots or anything like that, because once you fold them over, you've broken the leaf, so there's only 50% of it working as opposed to 100%. And bulbs need feeding as well. I normally recommend a dose of a low nitrogen fertiliser so that you get good results from them.
Johnny, we've come through to this gorgeous Italianate part of the garden, and I believe you've got a fantastic recommendation for narcissus in pots.
Yeah, well, we've got here one called Jetfire, which is one of my favourites for pot work. This is a division 6 or cyclaminous type, and you can see how the petals are swept back. And the beauty of that, of course, is means that the cup is well pronounced and you see the colour of it, so it stands out at a distance as well. So this is one that I really love in containers.
Now, obviously these are flowering in springtime. What would you recommend to get sort of extension at the other end of the season, so flowering in April and May time?
Well, I'd probably go for minnow, which is again ideal for containers, but you can also plant it in the border. Multi-headed, little flower, it's a very pretty little thing. But the ultimate end of season one, of course, has to be Poeticus recurvus, pheasant's eye. This has got a wonderful fragrance. It's just a wonderful flower.
Now, people always ask me what's my favourite plant, and it's always impossible to answer, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you the same question. What is your favourite narcissus?
It's like asking me which is my favourite grandchild.
Right.
But we have got one over here that's grown in containers that I think is pretty good, and one that I wouldn't want to be without. This is Tate. It's good for containers, it's good in the border on the rockery. I've actually got it underplanted in roses because this time of the year, because the roses, they're just a load of sticks, they're just beginning to shoot out. Lifts that area tremendously, and what could be a very dull area of the garden looks absolutely superb.
Well, that's brilliant advice, Johnny. It's been such a pleasure looking round with you today and gleaning just a bit of knowledge about narcissus from you, so thank you very much.
I've enjoyed it very much as well. Thank you.
I was really hoping that this daffodil, Thalia, in the writing garden, would be at its best for today. But actually, only about a third of the flowers are out, and it's really special because it's almost white. The writing garden is intended to be fundamentally a white garden, although there are touches of yellow and touches of pink. And as Nick was saying, the rear view, looking down on the back, is almost as good as the front. But the truth is, it's been so cold and grey that most of them are still closed. They will probably be at their best in a week or so's time. But the snowflakes are looking really good. And as you look at it and you think it's the daffodils, in fact, it's the snowflakes that are adding most of the white, and they've taken really successfully. But I've got a couple of bulbs which will flower long after daffodils have been and gone and been forgotten for a year. The first is a whopper. This is a crinum Powellii album, and it grows into a great 6-foot-tall plant with great lily-like flowers and strapping leaves, and has an amazing scent, which tends to come out at the end of the day. So you have a hot August day, and then the warm, velvety night air is fused with its fragrance. I've also got a bulb from South Africa, which will flower again in July, August. It looks like a daffodil, but this is a Galtonia candicans, the summer hyacinth. This will grow about 3-4 foot tall, and then these bells of white flowers hang down from it, something between a giant snowflake and hyacinth. And this also will add that white sense of bulbous sort of outpouring of flower later on in the year. So now is the time to plant these summer bulbs. Now, these crinum need space, so I'll only get 3 in this area here, maybe 4 at a pinch. Both these plants, the Galtonia and the crinum, like to be moist, but at the same time, they like good drainage. So I've got a bucket of grit. Now, they don't want to be planted too deep. And I might have to enlarge it a bit with my trowel. Right, let's take that out. So the bulb, the top, wants to be about flush with the soil. So it could be a little bit deeper, and I want room for the gravel to go underneath it. And then that. So that will go in there like that. Then we can just backfill around it. Now, I've got a stick at the back. I'm just going to mark that. And that is going to grow right up. It's going to grow as tall as me, lush flowers, and it'll add real drama to the back of the summer border. It is important that when you're planting these bulbs to think carefully where you want them, because they don't like being moved. And they are reasonably long-lived, so it's worth taking trouble. And they're hungry. If you've got thin soil, load on the compost. Don't necessarily have to dig it in, but you can just lay it as a thick mulch. And then in winter, they are fairly hardy, but they will benefit from a thick mulch of something like bracken or straw or compost, if you've got it, over the top of them to add protection against frost, and also that will work in the soil and feed it. Right, that's a little group of big plants at the back here, and I'll put another one over on the other side. But now I want to plant the Galtonia, and I'm going to put those in clumps on the other side of the garden where it's a little bit more sunny. This is a good place, behind the buddleia. Make a hole, and because these are rather smaller bulbs, I don't need to dig down any further than the depth of the bulb planter. And if I do them in groups of 3 and 5 all the way along, I'll get that rhythm of these white hanging flowers, which will flow through the border in summer. Well, in this day and age, most of us have gardens that are rather smaller than we would like, and certainly gardens come in every possible shape and size. But I do think the grandest horticultural concept is an arboretum. To set out a collection of trees on a large landscape doesn't just mean growing things in big space, it means thinking in big expanses of time. And last week, Flo Headlam went down to Gloucestershire to visit one of our most famous arboretums.
Welcome to Westonbirt, the National Arboretum, one of the finest collections of trees and shrubs in the world. You can think of this place as a huge museum where you can discover and learn more about, well, trees. But I'm not just here for the scenery, I'm here to work. I'm going to join the team that maintains and nurtures the Arboretum. I'm going to roll my sleeves up and get busy. It's going to be fun. First up, I'm meeting with Mark Ballard, who is the curator. Hey, Mark.
Hey, how you doing, Flo?
Hi. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm good.
Nice to see you.
This place is absolutely stunning. When was the Arboretum actually established?
We say 1829. Robert Stainer Halford started this all from scratch, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So where we stood now is arable farmland. But he had a great passion for plants, a great passion for garden design. It was a time when plants were being discovered and brought back from all over the temperate world. So the Arboretum grew and evolved, and it's constantly moved forwards ever since.
So tell me about this old oak tree.
Well, it predates the Arboretum, so it's more than 200 years old. You can see from how it's grown tall and straight. Obviously, once upon a time, it was surrounded by probably other trees here.
Oh, okay.
We have a special affection for it. We refer to it as the Master's Oak, and it's a wonderful tree.
Yeah, it is majestic.
And sometimes we have to get up there and work at height. And actually, believe it or not, we have a tree that needs some work at height. So we have a challenge for you coming up.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yes! For my first task, Andy Bryce will be showing me the ropes. He's one of the arborists who helps maintain the Arboretum on a daily basis. Wow, that's a big tree. This is a Scots pine?
It is. It's one of our native pines here in the UK, Pinus sylvestris. 20 years ago, a big limb fell out of it.
Right.
And what's been left now over the years is a cavity. There's some decay in there. So we want to pop up there, have a look in there and see what's going on.
Right, well, let's do it.
Shall we?
Let's go up.
As you pull down, really thrust your hips up, because then that's helping just to... All right, like that. That's it.
It's hard work.
You don't need to go to the gym.
It's all upper body, isn't it?
We've got another 30 feet to go as well.
Oh, God.
I'll tell you what, there is an easier way.
Is there?
We'll get the cherry picker in.
Yes.
You see, this is where the face cut, the chainsaw cut was many, many years ago. And we look inside and there's all this detritus and decayed wood.
Yeah.
You can even see all the old tree rings.
You can see the rings, God, yes.
This outer ring of wood that's being put on every year is more than enough to compensate for this big hole here.
So it's keeping it healthy.
It's keeping it upright and strong and flexible.
Right.
Now, I don't want to say that the tree knows of this hole here, but it reacts to this loss of internal strength by putting on this new live wood on the outside.
As a kind of protection.
That's right.
So this tree's going to be here for a while then, you think?
I reckon so. This will be here for a good few more years yet, definitely.
Brilliant. Now on to some tree planting. I'm meeting head arborist Richard Townsend and propagator Penny Jones. Penny, what's the name of the tree we're going to plant today?
Today we've got a Chrysolepis chrysophylla. It's a member of the oak and beech family, and it comes from Oregon in the United States.
Right, and what's the common name?
Its common name is a giant chinkapin.
Giant chinkapin, right, and it's evergreen.
It is an evergreen,
But
yes.
some interesting leaf colour there, I can see.
Yes, got a golden underside to the leaf.
I understand this plant was grown from seed, is that right?
Yes, it was collected by a member of our tree team in 2015.
How long has that plant been in propagation then?
This germinated in 2016.
And is this the first one that we're planting?
This is the first one from that collection that we're planting, yes.
How exciting. Richard, how deep are we going to go to plant this tree?
So if you was to offer that plant into the hole, we try to plant the plant slightly mounded, only a bit, to allow for a bit of sinkage. 99 times out of 100, the reason for poor health on plants is because they're too low.
How do you decide where to plant?
In this sort of landscape, we use evergreen for backdrop to set off things like camellias and magnolias.
Right, isn't it time to plant this baby?
Oh, it is.
Good,
yeah.
right, let's do it. Brilliant, I think that's the job done, isn't it?
Yeah, just a cage. and
Yeah.
That's done, because don't want to get eaten overnight with some rabbits.
It feels really good to have done that and to just plant something that is for the future.
I know. Yeah, it's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Now, the job I'm doing here is sowing yet more bulbs. It's a very bulby time of year, but these are going to be edible shallots. This was top dressed with compost last autumn, and that's worked in. And what shallots like is a nice rich soil but good drainage, which means that raised beds are absolutely ideal for them if you've got heavy soil like we have here. So this is perfect. And I'm just removing bits of sticks and stone that were in the compost. And you grow them from sets. You can grow them from seed, but it's much easier from sets. Now, a set is an immature bulb. You can have onion or shallot sets, and this is a variety called Longor, and you can see they're called Longor because they're long. And the beauty of shallots is that they have really good sweet taste. And you put one set in the ground, and it will clump up and can produce half a dozen to a dozen small bulbs. They're not great big ones like onions. They're very easy to grow, they store very well, and you grow them in exactly the same way as onions. On a raised bed, I can put them in a grid, and I'm going to use the board to keep the lines straight, and space each set about 9 inches apart, and push them in the ground so just the top is showing. And it goes without saying, pointy end sticking up, and the flatter end, which has got the plate from which the roots come, go into the ground. This is a job that you do want to get on with. There's no point in doing it until the weather is right and the ground is right, but I would suggest that as soon as your soil is ready, this is something you should do. And there's no reason why you can't grow them in a container either. One of the problems that you might encounter is that birds can see the top sticking out the ground and they pull them out. And I've actually caught them in the act. They just get hold of that and yank it out the ground. So what you can do is cover them until they're growing strongly. And once you see strong top growth, that means the roots are in the ground and it literally tethers them. The birds might try and pull them, but they won't get far because the roots are holding them. For every one you put in, you can potentially get 10 back. So a small batch of sets that you buy should give you a really good harvest. And certainly when I fill this bed up, that will supply us in shallots for a full 12 months. Now, this is a job that I have done as early as late February or March, but over the last few weeks, it's been really tricky. You do what you can when the weather allows. But assuming there are windows of opportunity for you this weekend, here are some jobs for you. Sunflowers are one of our most popular plants, and now is the time to sow them. And they come in many different shades. I'm sowing a variety called Claret, which is a beautiful burgundy colour and ideal for my jewel garden. Whatever colour, sow them in pots. I'm reusing old plastic pots filled with a good compost. I sow 2 seeds per pot, intending to weed out one of them when they've both germinated. Cover the seeds over, put them somewhere warm and water them, and they should be ready to plant out round about the beginning of June. Epimediums are one of the best spring flowers for dark, shady places. However, they can easily be hidden by last year's foliage. So this should be removed at the base to reveal these delicate plants in all their glory. A month ago, I put some dahlia plants on a heated mat to stimulate them into growth to make cuttings. And now those shoots are ready. Use a sharp knife and sever the shoots as close as possible to the tubers. Cut off any lower leaves and bury them in a gritty compost so at least an inch or 2 of the stem is under the soil. Put them in a warm place and keep them misted until you see signs of strong growth, and then they can be potted on. After we showed the frog spawn some weeks ago, there was quite a lot of activity on social media and letters and things. People worried about the cold weather killing it off. Well, certainly here at Longmeadow, it's absolutely fine. The pond is shimmering with tadpoles, and I know that if once we get a little bit of warmth, they will very quickly become little baby frogs, which is wonderful. And the pond is looking good. The marsh marigolds add gaiety, the irises are growing really strongly, and I love the way that the stone is developing this covering of moss. I get so many letters about people how to get rid of moss and lawn. Well, I'd like to see how we can encourage moss. The more the better. It looks absolutely beautiful and we should celebrate it. But there's no more time for moss or anything else, I'm afraid. That's it for this week. But I'll be back at Longmeadow at the same time next Friday. So until then, bye-bye.